All right, so let's look at finding the domain and range for 10, 11, and 12. So these are what's called piecewise functions, and it's actually what we're going to look at in the very next section of the textbook, in section 2.3. So we'll learn more about these very soon, but until then, we can still find the domain and range. So for the domain, as always, we start on the left. We see that there's an arrow on the end of the line, so it starts at negative infinity. And as I head to the right, I see it's including all of those negative values, includes 0, that includes everything up to 1 on this line here. And then it's going to start on this one, it's going to start at 1 and it includes 1. And then this one also keeps going and then has an arrow on the end, so it goes to infinity. So we have a little bit of an issue here that this says don't include 1 and this says do include 1. So if we go back to that idea of pushing everything to the axis, so for the domain we would be pushing everything into the x-axis. And while there would be a hole here from this hollow dot, this solid dot is going to come down and fill it in. Okay? And so we actually get the entire x-axis here. And really what this turns out to be is all real numbers. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to switch papers here so we can look at the range. So I'd like to do the same sort of thing where we push everything in towards the y-axis. So if I start here, so this is got an arrow on the end, so we can start at the bottom and work our way up. And I do have a hollow dot here. So right now I'm going to include everything here, including the arrow, but not the hollow dot. And there's nothing between -1 and +1 for y values. Big gap there. And we start again at 1. And if I push all of this into the y-axis, and again, I have that arrow there, so it just keeps going. It is going to go, go, go. So we're going from -infinity to -1. We're not going to include that -1. And then we have nothing until we hit 1. So we're going to start at 1 and go to +infinity. So here's your domain for 10 was all real numbers, and this is your range here. All right, so let's take a look at 11. So again, we start on the left side for the domain. I see the arrow here, so I'm going to push all of these up to the x-axis. There is my hollow dot, and then I have nothing in the middle here. Then this filled in dot is going to make its way there. And I'm going to push, so just pushing everything into the x-axis. And I see that arrow there, so I know it keeps going. So I'd be looking at all of that, but not including this hollow dot. And then I will include this solid one and everything that comes after it. So my domain here is -infinity to -1, but not including that -1. And then I start at a +1 and go to +infinity. Okay. And for the range, we're going to take and push this function into the y-axis for the range. Okay, so we're headed this way. Keeps going. Now we have this issue here. So I get a hollow dot here. But for this one, I get a solid dot. So the solid dot is going to trump the hollow dot. So I get to fill this in. So I actually have this whole axis here for my range. So my range is going to be all real numbers. All right, and then one last one, number 12. So for the domain, starting at the left side of the graph, so I'm going to push everything into this axis. And if you get really good at spotting these, some people can look at this and go, okay, that starts at -infinity, and it goes until x is equal to -2. And we are going to include -2 because it's got a solid dot. And then nothing in the middle here, and it starts again at 1 with a hollow dot, so rounded. And then, oh, there's the arrow, so I know I'm going to +infinity. Okay. So if you're getting to a point where you can see that, that's totally fine. If not, feel free to do this trick of kind of smushing it into the appropriate axis. So for the range, I see the arrow at the bottom end of this function, so I know it's going to start at -infinity. And it's going to go until it hits here on the y-axis. So that is -3. It's a square bracket from the filled in dot. And then there's a huge gap in here before we see your function pick back up here at y equals 2. The hollow dot gets a rounded parentheses, and we see that this is going to infinity, so we're going to go to positive infinity with our y values there. Okay, so there's your domain and range for 3 piecewise functions.